Welcome back. This is Isaac, and you're watching the ACT Reading Prep. The last lecture we've been going into or tackling one of the social science passages, and we saw how it was, again, similar to the prose fictions, and then we're going to try to continue this again as we look into the different social science related passages. Now remember, like I said in the previous lecture, the social science related topics or social science related passages also deal with US situations or the things that are going on in US, right? So you need to keep that in mind, that it's US related, and it'd be prudent for you to know the backgrounds that has to do with the US social issues and social sciences. All right, so let's get back to today's lecture. We're looking at pages 606 and 607 in the Real ACT Prep Guide. All right, so if you have the book, please open them up and let's get started with the passage. All right, so the passage today is adapted from Richard Mouw's article, The Mindless Madness Called Sprawl, based on a speech he gave on November 30th of 1996 in Fresno, California. So 1996, right? Not so important, but again. And then it says, at the time he gave the speech, Mouw was president of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. All right. So what's the National Trust for Historic Preservation? Well, when you say historic preservation, it means you're preserving the historical sites and historical buildings, historical roads, any landmarks or land sites, right? So that you could protect the heritage, right? That's what historic preservation is. Now, as you realize today, I mean, there are things that are happening so fast. A lot of places or a lot of old buildings get tear down and then the new ones come up because new ones obviously will have more economic benefits than the old ones, right? And so what the National Trust for Historic Preservation does is to preserve these historical sites. If they are deemed to have historical value, any value at all, they should be preserved, right? So anyways, here he's talking about the sprawl, right? So mindless madness called a sprawl. So what is a sprawl? I mean, you need to understand this, right? Now, sprawl is an extended, it's like it's an extension of the city. So it's an extension of the city means it's an expansion of the city, and it's expanded without any planning at all. It's just growing, right? City just keeps on growing, expanding itself is what we call the sprawl, or the area that's been expanded would be called the sprawl, right? Now, not many cities do these, but there are many cities that tend to have this. Now, for example, LA is one of those cities. If you look at one of those cities like LA used to be, well, LA is just hectic in a sense, because there is a planning, of course. There has been planning or city planning put into it, but because of the rapid expansion of the cities, the outskirts of the cities, right, become sort of like I would have to say like a ghost town, so to speak. It's been expanded, but it's not completely filled, right? I mean, there are malls here and there and there, and there are suburbs here and there, but then it's not really what we call a compact or compacted city, right? So that's what we call the sprawl, right? And it's a social issue because sprawls are a waste of land. It's a waste of everything, waste of resources and whatnot, right? So that's what we're talking about here. And then that's why it says the mindless and the madness, right? Okay, good. So let's get started with the reading. Of course, the first paragraph is always considered an introductory part, and so we'll read the first and the last sentence of that paragraph. So it says, drive down any highway leading into any town in the country, and what do you see? So that's a question, and let's see what that question answers the question of, or what the answer of the question that is. Fast food outlets, office parks, shopping malls rising out of vast barren plains of asphalt. So I guess we're talking about just, if you go downtown or highway leading into the town in the country, you'll see malls, you'll see fast food chains, you'll see the shopping malls, you'll see the office parks, and you'll see the fast food outlets in the vast barren of nothing but asphalt. Right? That's what we're talking about. All right. And then if you read the last sentence, it says cars moving sluggishly down the broad ribbons of pavement or halting in frustrated clumps at choked intersections. You see communities drowning in a destructive, soulless, ugly mess called the sprawl. Right? So we'll read that from there. But then if you completely see that as the last sentence, then you see communities drowning in a destructive, soulless, ugly mess called the sprawl, right? Okay, so anyways, I guess this guy, Richard Moe, or Mo Richard, or Richard Moe, is thinking that sprawls are bad. It's something to get rid of, right? It's a destructive, soulless, ugly mess, right? So that's what he's saying. And then the second paragraph, the first line says, many of us have developed a frightening form of selective blindness that allows us to pass by the appalling mess without really seeing it. So I guess what we are doing is we're sort of, ignoring the sprawl, the mess that we're in, right? That's what the guy is saying. And then the third paragraph, development that destroys communities isn't progress. So that's one of the statement. Development that destroys communities isn't progress. Now, if you think about it in a social sense, human beings have started to get together as we started to hunt and gather, right? And we realized that throughout the course of evolution, we realized that being together, right, in a community, forming, say, it's better than having a family of five than having a family of 2 or 3 families of 5. It's easier for them to protect themselves and easier for them to work and harvest and share between the communities, right? So that's why we've been forming communities. And according to Richard Moe, he's saying that the sprawl, or the formation or the development of the sprawls, is actually prohibiting or inhibiting the formation of the communities. It's not developing the communities, but it destroys the communities, right? Okay, that's another fact. Next, why is an organization like the National Trust for Historic Preservation so concerned about the sprawl, right? So why? There should be an answer right after that, so we'll read that as well. We are concerned because the sprawl devastates older communities, leaving historic buildings and neighborhoods underused, poorly maintained, or abandoned. That's what we're saying. So if the sprawls keep on coming up, what happens is that people will abandon the older communities, right? It will devastate the older communities because it will leave, they will be leaving the historic buildings and neighborhoods underused, poorly maintained, or abandoned, and that's why he's very concerned about this. The older communities will have its historic value, right? I mean, for example, the buildings will have the historic values, or the names of the roads, or how the roads are formed will have a historic value and whatnot, right? So that's what we're talking about here. That's why he's concerned with it. So this paragraph is definitely out of nowhere. He's probably saying the reason why he's very concerned about this, right? But he says sprawls are bad, and then he says why he's interested in sprawl because of these reasons, and then we'll move on to the second or the next paragraph. But our concern goes beyond that, he says, beyond that idea, because preservation today is about more than bricks and mortar, right? So he's saying that it's more than bricks and mortar, meaning it's more than just protecting the building itself, right? He will talk about what that is, right? And then the next paragraph. One form of the sprawl retained the retail development that transforms roads into strip malls is frequently spurred on by discount retailers, many of whom are now concentrating on the construction of the superstores with more than 200,000 square feet of space. All right. So that's what we're talking about, the strip malls. You know what a strip mall is, right? Strip malls are like Kmart's or Walmart's that are out in nowhere, right? You see one of those malls, right? It's because, of course, it's easy. I mean, the land is cheaper there, and therefore they build it out there somewhere, right? And, they build huge parking lots, and so that you can go park there and then shop, and then, I mean, that's what we call strip malls, and you see a lot of those in America, right? You see a lot of those in America. I mean, you can see this a lot in the developing countries as well. I was recently in Malaysia, and you would see a lot of these in Malaysia as well. Malaysia is essentially, they're not that bad off, right? They are actually economically okay country. And so therefore there's a lot of development going on. And if you see those developments, what they're doing is they're building huge malls out of nowhere, right? Just like in America, the public transportation there isn't so good. And so therefore, most of the people will drive their own vehicle. And what they can do is drive that vehicle to the malls that are, outskirts or very far away from the cities and shop there and come back to their urban homes, suburban homes, right? So therefore, that's what we call the problem here. The problem is, of course, is that one from the sprawls like these ones are now turning into the superstores with the space is more than 200,000 square feet, right? It's turning into a huge giant monster now. That's what he's worried about, all right? Or at least that's one form of the sprawl that the author is worried about. And then it says, sprawl's other most familiar form, spread out residential subdivisions that leapfrog from the urban fringe into the countryside, is driven largely by the American dream of a detached home in the middle of a grassy lawn, all right? That's what we're talking about. This is the idea. We're talking about the suburban homes, right? Suburban homes are formed in a way. So what happens is, let's say if there's a downtown of the cities, right? It will be usually located at about 20 to 40K clicks out, 20 to 40 kilometers away, or at least about by vehicle, it should take about 20 to 30 minutes out, right? So 20 to 30 minutes out, and there'll be like suburbs. So it will be formed this way. Usually what happens is that you will have the road leading into the suburb, and there will be the end of the road, and you will see the road splitting into two, and then you will have the houses that are built in rows, right? And they're like the subdivisions or the units of the houses that will be formed here and there and there. And this is what we call a community, a suburb community, right? And he's saying that that's one of the other forms, or most the familiar forms of sprawls that are forming within these areas of the cities, right? The outskirts of the cities. All right, so that's another one of those. So the previous passage in this passage or paragraph talks about the form of a sprawl, right? One would be the strip malls, and the other one would be the suburbs or the houses that are built in the countryside. And then the next paragraph says the developer's own experience may be less, and the home buyer may find the practice attractive, but who picks up the extra costs of fire and police protection, new roads, and new utility infrastructure in these outlying areas? So he's also concerned about who will take care of the infrastructures, the police and fire stations, and the water pipeline that leads to there, right? And the electricity or electric lines that goes there. So who will take care of these? That's what he's worried about. And then the next paragraph says, people who say that sprawl is merely the natural product of marketplace forces at work fail to recognize that the game isn't being played on a level field. So we're talking about game playing on a level field, meaning it's not fair. It's not fair to say that it's been forced by the marketplace, right? That's what he's saying. Or we'll read deeper into it, but right now we just want to understand it that way, all right? And then the next paragraph says, by prohibiting mixed uses and mandating inordinate amounts of parking and unreasonable setback requirements, most current zoning laws make it impossible, even legal, to create a sort of a compact, workable or walkable environment that attracts us to older neighborhoods and historic communities all over the world. So I guess there's laws that regards it's illegal to create sort of compact, walkable environment within the older communities is against laws apparently. And that's why we can't really stimulate the use of the older communities or use of the, it's that people tend to move one from the other to the other and to the other. And that is bad according to Richard Moe. And then it says our community should be shaped by choice, not by chance. Right? Our community should be shaped by choice, not by chance, right? That's what he's saying. So we can't really, we need to choose where we live. I mean, we could choose to live in the older communities as well as the newer communities. I mean, but the older communities have that historic value in them. And, so you can't just say, okay, you can't live here because of the laws. It prohibits them from creating more spaces or more parking spaces or whatnot. I mean, that's going to be inhibition, right? I mean, so that's not what we want. I mean, what we want is that the community should be shaped by the choices that people make. I mean, some people can choose to live in the older communities as well as some people choosing to live in the newer communities, right? Not by chance, all right? So that's the idea of this sprawl formation of at least the social issues that are going on today. Now, this is especially true in America and especially true in many countries that take steps after America, like the countries that I mentioned, like Malaysia and Singapore. Now, the problem is that this is not going to work forever because you already know that there was an economic recession in 2008 and people, I mean, what we call a middle class, have been completely devastated. And if you think about it, those people who move to these suburbs and sprawls is those people who are in the middle class. And if you see the destruction of the middle class, I mean, you will see that it's not going to work. I've seen a lot of those in Malaysia and Singapore. I mean, they built these suburban homes and they built these malls, but no one goes there anymore because they simply cannot afford to live there, and they simply cannot, they simply cannot make it there because of the lack of the money, lack of the assets, lack of whatever. I mean, it doesn't just work. And some of those areas, you will see that there's only malls, but nothing else. No other community effort whatsoever, right? So I mean, you have to you have to go ride your car to 20 to 30 minutes to get to somewhere to shop or to grocery shopping or whatsoever, right? So therefore, I would see this as a bad social impact, right? Because if you let's say in Korea or places like Korea, you don't see this that often. I mean, even the strip malls are built within the cities themselves, and of course there are some other strip malls outside or outer skirts or the satellite cities of cities in Korea, but still it does have a relatively relatively fewer sprawls than any other countries, I would have to say. But it's in the increase, and I guess that's how the market's forcing the people to do, right? So Richard Moe is pointing that out. He's saying that it's not true. It shouldn't work. I mean, we should be able to choose where we can live because historical buildings or the older communities have these historical valuable buildings and valuable roads, and we shouldn't really destroy it, but rather we should make use of it, right? That's what he's saying, because they have value in them, right? Okay, so we've understood the passages, right? And now let's move on to the question and see what we can do with that, right? Okay, number 11. Easy question. The principal aim of the passage can best be classified as. So what is the writer doing? Is he being persuasive? Is he being explanatory? Or is he being descriptive? Or is he being narrative? Now, one thing for sure is that he's not being narrative because he's explaining things, not telling a story, right? He's not saying there's a guy, Sam, and Sam was doing this and blah, blah, blah. We're not doing that, right? Okay. Descriptive. Now, descriptive is, you already know the type of a writing when we say descriptive. Descriptive is like you're describing a, say, sprawl, right? If it were to be descriptive, you have to describe the sprawl, like, for example, describe it to its sizes, describe to its locations, how many people are living there. I mean, these are what we call descriptive writings, but this is not really descriptive because he doesn't really describe in detail what a sprawl is and whatever he's talking about, right? Explanatory, yes, it could be explanatory because he's trying to explain, but rather what he's doing, if you read it carefully in the last paragraph, says our communities should be shaped by choice, not by chance. What he's doing is stating his opinion, and therefore he's trying to make you persuaded. He's trying to persuade you to think that sprawls are not good, that we need to have the choices to live where we want to live. So by reading this last sentence, we know that the answer has to be persuasive, right? Simple as that. The answer is persuasive. He's trying to be persuasive, right? If you didn't have that last sentence there, if you didn't have that, then you could definitely say it's an explanatory because he's explaining things, right? But again, here you see a lot of the opinions of the writer, Richard Moe. He's having this opinions out, and he's saying, as a member of the, or as the president, or now he doesn't say as the president, but why is it that he's interested in these sprawls and the formation of the sprawls is because, sprawls will destroy the historical value of certain buildings, certain older communities. And that's what he's saying. And then furthermore, he said blah, 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 blah. And so therefore, what he's trying to do is to try to persuade you to think that sprawls are bad, right? Okay, so the answer has to be persuasive. Good. Let's move on to the next question. Among the following quotations from the passage, the one that best summarizes what the author would like to see happen is. So what does the author would like to see happen? Now, if you remember, what he wants it to happen is that if you can just process whatever we've read, what he wants is that he wants the sprawls to, well, he doesn't want the sprawls to be gone, but he believes that people need to have the choices to either to live in the older communities or the newer communities, and maybe we could do a little bit more of a stimulation to the older communities so that we can, use these old historical buildings rather than tear them down and build another strip mall on there, right? So therefore, that's the idea. So is it laws and policies that constitute powerful incentives for sprawl, or is it the destruction of traditional downtowns? Or is it affordable housing on the edge of the town? Or is it an integrated system of planning and decisions and regulations? So I guess the best possible answer, I would have to say this, right? Why is that? Because if you think about it, author would like to see happen is not the laws and policies that constitute powerful incentive for sprawls. No, he doesn't want the powerful incentives for the sprawl because he is against sprawl, right? So therefore, no. Destruction of the traditional downtowns? No, that's not what he wants to see. He wants to see the downtowns living again or reliving its old glorious days, right? H, affordable housing on the edge of the town? No, that's the sprawl, right? He doesn't want that. But what does he want? He wants an integrated system of planning and decisions and regulations. So planning would be, you need to really plan out why you are building that strip mall there, why are you building that 200,000 square feet space of superstores, or why are you building the suburban homes in a certain area, right? He wants to have the decisions made, right? Decisions and planning, and the regulations as well. Maybe you need to regulate some of these strip malls from, building or being built, and, some other superstores from being built, because it destroys communities, and so therefore that's what we're talking about. So the answer, of course, definitely is J. Of course, where the author wants to see some kind of an agreement made, right, so that older communities as well as newer communities can live and thrive together. Okay, that's the idea. Let's move on to the next question. 13. The last paragraph differs from the first paragraph in that in the last paragraph the author. Now we read the last paragraph and we know that the author has got something to say in the last paragraph. Is he asking questions and then answer it? Does he use more of the statistics to support his argument? Or does he incorporate more emotional language, or is it offer solutions rather than stating a problem? So what is he doing? Let's go to the first, let's try to compare the first and the last paragraph, right? We almost read all of the first paragraph, if you remember. Let's go back to that first paragraph. The first paragraph, it says, drive down any highway leading into any town in the country, and what do you see? Fast food outlets, blah, 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 right? So he's asking questions and trying to answer his questions, and then it says cars moving sluggish down the broad ribbons of pavements, or halting in frustrated clumps at choked intersections. You see communities drowning in a destructive, soulless, ugly mess called the sprawl, right? So therefore, he's trying to say something about, this is what I'm going to talk about, but sprawls are bad, right? He's stating his opinion. Now, in the last paragraph, if you see, our community should be shaped by choices, not by chances. And then it says one of the most effective ways of reach this goal is to insist on sensible land use planning. The way we zone and design our communities either opens up, blah, 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 blah. So he's now offering solutions to the problem, right? So in the first paragraph, he stated the problem, saying sprawls are problems. And then in the last paragraph, he gives us some kind of a solution as to how to solve this question, right? So if that's the idea, let's take a look at it. Is it asking a question then answering it? Well, in the last paragraph, he doesn't do that. Uses more statistics to support his argument. I don't think he uses statistics in the last paragraph. He uses statistics probably prior to that, but not in the last paragraph. Does he incorporate more of the emotional language? No, not really. We're not really talking about emotions. He's not appealing to emotion. He's not a logically fallacious person, right? So therefore, offer solution rather than stating a problem. Definitely. His solution, right? He says that there should be regulations. There should be regulations to the zoning. There should be regulations to the usage of the land, right? That's what he's saying. Straight off the bat, he's telling you the solutions in the last paragraph. So therefore, D should be your answer. Easy, right? Because we've already read it. We know what the first and the last paragraph talks about anyways, right? Moving on to the next. 14. In the passage, the author answers all of the questions except for this one, right? All of the questions. Now, it says in the passage, so you should know at least the flow of the passage, right? And we all at least know what the flow of the passage is. Let's see if these questions can be answered from what we know, all right, rather than what the passage talks about. So first of all, how long has the sprawl been happening in U.S. cities? Can you really notice, or at least what we've read, do you know when it started to form? Well, not really, because we can't really answer this, so we can't really answer this yet. How about G? Is development synonymous with progress? Is development synonymous with progress? Well, maybe not. We'll give it a 1 bar, right? Or what is one major reason that people in the United States use automobiles so much? Well, not so sure, right? So put it 1 bar. And then what should communities do to combat sprawl? Now, this one, definitely there is, right? So there is answering of this question. Definitely. Why is that? Because in the last paragraph, it says solutions, right? It's stating the solution. So this is definitely out of the question. This is not one of our answers because we're looking at the except, right? So this one can be answered. Now I'll give this one a 1 bar as well. So these 3 are the problems, right? How do we figure that out? So let's see where these could be happening. Now, if this were to be somewhere, how long has the sprawl been happening in the US cities? You have to look into the very beginning, right? How about this one? Development synonymous with progress? Probably in the middle somewhere, right? And then what is the major reason why people in the United States use automobiles so much? Not so sure, so we'll find the word automobiles within the passage, right? So let's do H first of all. Let's try to find automobiles somewhere, right? I'm pretty sure you will be able to find them. So let's start from the very beginning. Drive down the way, that's automobile, but it doesn't really say automobiles. Doesn't say any automobiles, right? So we'll move on. And then going on and 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 on, and doesn't really say anything about the automobiles yet. And then going on and on and on and on and on and on and on, blah, blah, not really, right? Doesn't really say anything about the automobiles. And then you go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And it says, here you go. The average American household now allocates more than 18% of its budget to transportation expenses, most of which are auto-related. That's more than it spends for food and 3 times more than it spends for health care. So it says these codes, or better yet, these codes are a major reason why 82% of all trips in America, United States, are taken by a car. So does that answer the question? Yes, it does answer the question, right? It does answer the It does answer the question in the sense that, yes, what is the major reason that people in the United States use automobiles so much? Because of the sprawl. Because they have to go to the mall, which is 20 meters 20 minutes away or 30 minutes away from their house, right? There's no specific transportation that takes you there. And so therefore you have to drive yourself there, right? So definitely that's in the question, or that's definitely out. Now the 2 left, right? Development synonymous with progress, or how long has the sprawl happening in the United States? So let's do F first of all, right? Let's see if F appears in the passage. Now, like we said, it should be in the very beginning because that's where the sprawls come up, right? The topic of sprawls come up. So can you really see when the sprawl begins? So if it's when, it should have some kind of date, right? 1996, of course, here says 1996, but that's when he presented himself. So 1990, whatever, 1980, whatever. Do you see any one of these numbers? It says somewhere, I mean, there's 200,000 square feet, but it doesn't say anything about the number, right? Or at least the year, right? Doesn't say anything. So therefore, definitely we can say that this is not within the actual passage. So that's most possibly our answer. But now the development with the progress, right? So let's try to find development, okay? So let's see development. Try to find that idea, development. All right, so there you go, development, right? It says development that destroys communities isn't progress. Right there, it says development that destroys communities isn't a progress. So definitely we can answer that question saying yes. Is development synonymous with progress? No. The author says no, it's not. Development that destroys the communities is not a progress. It's a devastation. So therefore, this also could be answered. So one thing that could not be answered by this would be definitely F. How long has it been? Sprawls. And we don't know how long. Well, we should know if you look it up on Google, but we don't know by what the author says, right? He's not really concerned about how long has it been, but he's just concerned about it's not a progress. And why do people ride cars too much? And also, why should communities or what should the communities do to combat these sprawls, right? Okay, so the answer has to be F. Let's move on to the next question. 15. The author states that one superstore may do all of the following except for this one. So superstore, you found that it's a 200,000 feet, right? Or square feet of space filled with rows and rows and rows of stores. That's what we call superstores. So what do the superstores do except for this one, right? So what you need to do is use your common sense to try to come up with or try to eliminate some of the answers. Let's start with A. Have more retail space than an entire downtown. I'm pretty sure it does because it's about 200 square feet. So let's just put a circle right next to it. Lead to serious downtown renovation. Lead to serious downtown renovation? Does it lead to serious downtown renovations? Not really true, because when we say superstores, they are built on the edges of the cities, right? So therefore, this probably not. How about C, make the downtown area into a ghost downtown? I'm pretty sure it does, because many people, because the superstore, will move to the suburbs so that they can use superstores. They don't necessarily have to live in the downtown, right? So therefore, yes. Shift the center of the gravity away from downtown. Yes, of course. Downtowns, when it's formed, it's going to be disappearing. It's going to be devastated when superstores are formed outside, right? So therefore, B is our answer. Let's check if B is our answer. Definitely our answer. But how do we find this answer, right? Now, renovations definitely not happen, because it doesn't really renovate the downtowns, but it destroys the downtowns. People will not use money to build anything up there, or they are not going to maintain that downtowns, because people have moved out already. There's nothing on downtown. Everything is located in the superstores, so they will live near the superstores, not the downtown. And so most possible logical answer should be lead to the serious downtown renovations. Everything else will happen, right? Everything else will happen, definitely. So the answer will be B. Simple as that, right? So if you use your common sense a little bit, you should be able to answer these questions. Let's go to the next question. 16. The statistics cited by the author in the 10th paragraph, 67 to 69, are used to illustrate the concept. So what is it trying to tell us, right? So we haven't read that statistic, so let's go to 67 and 69. So if you go to line 67 and 69, it's right there. So by prohibiting mixed uses, we'll probably use from there. We'll read from there. We already read that part, so we'll read somewhere here as well. So it says, by prohibiting mixed uses and mandating inordinate amounts of parking and unreasonable setback requirements, most current zoning laws make it impossible, even illegal, to create a sort of the compact, walkable environment that attracts us to older neighborhoods and historic communities all over the world. These codes are a major reason why 82% of all trips in the United States are taken by car. The average American household now allocates more than 18% of whatever statistics, right? Okay, good. So, what does it do? So, does it allow the mixed uses of land leads to the environmental destruction? We're not really talking about environmental destruction, are we? No, not really. We're not talking about eco-friendly and how the cars, being 82% of the Americans use cars as a transportation, and how that's bad for the environment. Doesn't talk about that. Current zoning laws help create compact, walkable environment. No, it's just said that it doesn't help at all, right? And then H, land use regulations now in effect increase the overall cost of transportation. That's a possibility, because the statistics came as an 82%, right? 82% of the Americans use cars. Now, if you think about it, if there was a downtown, right? This is still happening in downtowns of New York, Boston, Chicago, right? You will still see subways and buses that go do the route, or it does route out the whole city, right? So that still happens. But land use regulations now in effect increase the overall cost of transportation. Yes, because it prohibits zoning laws, right? It prohibits the habitation of the downtowns or the concentrated areas within the city. Americans spend too much money on their budgets on food and healthcare. No, it says transportation. They use a lot of money in transportation. So definitely the answer has to be H, and of course the answer has to be H, right? The land use regulations now in effect increase the overall cost of transportation. That's why the reason being is that there's lack of public transportation, and so therefore people have to drive their cars, and out of necessity, not out of want, but necessity, right? And of course, the cars will cost a lot of money because the maintenance of the car, the taxes that you have to pay, and the gas that you'll have to, right? The gas prices are through the roof. Well, not through the roof per se, but it's more expensive than a decade ago now in the U.S., right? I mean, it's really expensive. When I was it was really cheap. Now it's kind of expensive, right? So therefore, that's the idea. All right, so the answer is H. Let's move on to the next question. 17. One form of sprawl. So we already know the two forms of sprawls, right? One is the retail stores. One are these super huge super stores, retail stores, right? Strip malls and so on. That's the one thing. The second one would be, we already know, is the second one are the suburban homes, right? Suburbia, right? We know that. So these are two forms. So one form of sprawl that the author describes is the retail development. So retail development of what, right? Is it adjoining or adjoins existing downtown areas, or utilizes historic buildings, or is it turns roads into strip malls, or promotes the sense of community around the superstore? Now, this might sound familiar, but no, it doesn't promote a sense of community around the superstore, right? It doesn't promote it at all. The idea here has to be turning the roads into strip malls. Why is that? Because in the countryside, there'll be rows and rows of roads, and what they're doing is they're building strip malls right down so that they can drive and then they come to the stores to shop, right? That's one form, retail superstores, right? So the answer has to be C, definitely, right? I mean, it's no-brainer, right? It has to be that one form of the sprawl because we've already established two forms of sprawl when we were reading the passage, right? Okay, good. Let's move on to the next question now, 18. As it is used in line 51, the word detached most nearly means. So it's a vocab question. What you need to just find out would be the word detached. You already know. Is it objective? No. Does it broken apart? No. Is it taken away? No. Is it set apart? Well, no. But okay, so except for this objective, right? These three kind of have that idea. So in order to figure this out completely, let's go back to line 51 and see the word detached and what it means, all right? Let's go to line 51 and let's see what that word detached means. So it's here again. So sprawl's other most familiar form, spread out residential subdivisions that leapfrog from the urban fringes into the countryside, is driven largely by the American dream of a detached home in the middle of a grassy lawn. So meaning detached, meaning set apart from, right? Not taken away, not broken apart, but set apart from everybody else. That's an American dream, right? That used to be my dream as well, to build my own house in the middle of, not nowhere, but middle of a somewhere that it's, you know, it's cozy enough, it's quiet, you know, nobody's really around. I mean, you know, as much as I am a social person, I really don't like having neighbors too much, you know. But anyways, the idea is detached home, so it has to be apart from. So set apart from is your definite answer, right? Set apart from. Broken apart is not true, so is taken away. All right? Okay, two more questions to go. You see how fast we're picking this up, right? So let's go to number 19. The author uses the statement, the game isn't being played on a level field. We read that part already, coincidentally, right? And then most nearly means what? So if we read that part again, let's try to see if that part tells us something, right? So line 64, we read that part, but we're going to read that again. So if you go to that 64 part of it, there you go. It says, people who say that sprawl is merely the natural product of marketplace forces at work fail to recognize that the game isn't being played on a level field. Government at every level is riddled with policies that mandate or encourage sprawls. By prohibiting mixed uses and mandating inordinate amounts of the parking and unreasonable setback requirements, most current zoning laws make it impossible, even illegal, to create sort of a compact, walkable environment that attracts us to the older neighborhoods, right? So therefore, when we say a level ground, government is against us. Government is against creating or recreation of the downtown so that people will be attracted in living in downtowns, right? That's the idea. So if that's the idea, let's go back to the question and see what it means. So if you look at number 19, most nearly means what? So cities needlessly duplicate essential services, higher taxes for some people make their lives more difficult. About market forces are at work. Governmental decisions influence marketplace forces. So which one is it, right? This should be correct, but of course, marketplace forces not acting alone. It's the government decisions, right? Because right after that sentence says the government are in regulation. They create these policies that make it impossible for us to make the downtowns more attractive than the suburbia, right? So therefore, D is your answer. Simple as that, right? You see how we're saving time. Let's move on to the last question and see what we can do with that. 20. Phrase mixed uses in line 67 most likely refers to what? So we've read that part already too, the mixed use or whatever the land, right? I mean, if you think about it, mixed uses means that land, a lot of land should be used for a certain purpose, right? Certain function. It could be used as an industrial, right? Industrial use, meaning you can build factories and companies or whatever, right, on their facilities there. Or there is a home use, you can use, or you can build homes around that area. Or these are for offices, you can build offices on this area, and so on and on. That's what we call mixed use, right? I mean, think about it. In downtown, you have a limited amount of land, right? Limited amount of land. And if that limited amount of land is limited to only building industries or industrial complexes or offices or the homes, then what we're talking about is that the policies are bad, flawed, right? So therefore, having large parking lots around even larger stores, is it preserving and restoring historical neighborhoods, or ensuring that the automobiles cannot be driven to the various local businesses, or is it allowing one area to contain various types of development? Obviously, the answer has to be J, right? I just talked to you about this, right? So industries here, right? Industries, when they are trying to build something or limited areas of the say downtown, right? They need to make these land possible for all types of buildings, right? But they don't, because they sort of like limit this. Governments are against growing or against re-stimulating the downtown. So therefore, the only answer will have to be J. Allowing one area to contain various types of development is like the reference to the mixed uses, right? So if you knew these ideas, like for example, oh, I didn't know land was supposed to be used for some purpose, right? But there are land that are used for purposes, right? I mean, you can't just build, say you have you have billions of dollars and say you want to build a resort, right? Like, I want to build a golf resort. You cannot just pick out any land and build a golf resort, because you have to be sanctioned by the government to use it, right? You have to have the sanctions. You have to go to the government agencies and you have to talk to them and say, okay, I want to use this for this, and can I get some kind of a sanction? And if the government don't sanction, then you can't really build anything up there, right? But of course, government, in order to stimulate certain regions or certain areas, they will sanction you to build that thing on that area, right? So that's the idea here, allowing one area to contain various types of development. You see how that took us lesser time than the previous lectures, because we're getting used to the idea of getting the important information out from the passage. Take a look at the passage. Have we read a lot of parts of the passages? No, we only have read only the necessary parts, only the needed parts, right? So for example, here, we kind of read the everything, but again, that wasn't too much. We read this part, we read that part only. We had read this part, we read this part only. We only read this part, and this part, right? And then we only kind of read this part and this part only, right? So we haven't read most of these parts yet, right? Yet we were able to figure out the answers to the questions just by looking at some parts of the passages, right? This should take you less than, right? Or this entire thing, with the thing that we did just now, one passage, should take you less than 6 minutes. Because you have 4 passages and you're given 35 minutes to solve the 40 questions and plus the reading of the passages, meaning what you need to do is you're only allotted 7 minutes of time or 8 minutes of time, right, in every passage. Now, 8 minutes is not enough, not good enough, right? But of course, some of the questions you can solve easy. So if you can solve these questions in 5 or 6 minutes, right? 5 to 6 minutes. You have a lot more time to go back to the passage and try to find the right answers. Okay? So always keep that in mind. Spend only 5 to 6 minutes per passage. All right? If that could be achieved, all right? If that could be achieved, then you're only spending 64 minutes max in solving the 24 minutes in max in solving the questions, the entire 40 questions, and you still have how many minutes left? You still have 11 minutes left, right? You still have 11 minutes left. Now, what do you do with this 11 minutes? You go back to questions. Those questions you feel that you need to change, or you can start reading the important ideas within the passage so that the ones that you missed, maybe you made a mistake, right? You can fix that mistake by reading these passages, all right? That's what I want you to do within the reading passage, all right? So the next lecture, we are going to deal with 1 or 2 more of the social studies passages. And then, of course, we're going to continue to move on to the next type of passage, which is called humanities, all right? So thank you for watching. I'll be seeing you the next time. Bye-bye.